Hi, Mark. Thanks for helping my project. You were just kind of talking about, uh, some of the benefits you see. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I thought it'd be good to get it on tape.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, as I was saying, I think it's important what you're doing to capture the more humanist side of things, why we're doing what we're doing. Of course, everybody is really focused on the economic or the industrial aspects or of course the scientific pursuits. But I think it's really important to kind of get back to basics, especially me as a physician. I obviously deal with the human body, and a large part of that is not just taking care of the person as a system of moving parts, but also who they are individually. And I think it's important to be cognizant of that when you're trying to be a good clinician. By extension, when you're trying to kind of keep your feet on the ground, philosophically speaking, it's important to be attached to the person. And so that's why I think what you're doing is great, because you're cataloging all people's different experiences, from people who are high up in the space industries to kind of some more of the lay people, which is great.
Yeah, and people on the street and people that just happen to have the lucky seat sitting in the airplane next to me.
Oh, really? Okay, that's
Yeah.
good.
Um, you know, talking about kind of like caring for the individual and the person, not just people as a system of parts. Um, over the past kind of couple of weeks, I've had a lot more direct, interaction with the medical system than I really would like to. But um, and my grandfather used to be like a single practitioner doctor's office. I think like 30, 40 years ago,
Mm,
40, 50, 60 years ago. Gee whiz, time really passes.
yeah.
And medicine is like very different in his age than it is now. You used to have like this primary physician that really knew you, that you developed a relationship with over decades, who, you know, they may have treated multiple generations of your family, and it really seems that we've kind of gone from that to kind of more of assembly line type of approach with medicine. I've As a person in the medical field, um, I mean, how do you see it?
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword. I think you bring up a really important point that not only has implications terrestrially, but kind of as we move further out into the cosmos. Yeah, previously it was much more of a single kind of general clinician, and they had to rely really heavily on their clinical acumen and their gestalt to determine, hey, do I need to send this person to a facility that has some more specialists? Whereas nowadays we do have a lot more subspecialists kind of integrated in the community. By that I mean not just, let's say, neurologists, but also a movement disorder specialist. So not only are you getting a neurologist kind of somewhere, but which is one degree of separation from your primary care, like your father or your grandfather, but another step, because now it's someone who's even further subspecialized. And the problem, it's amazing because they're the true kind of bleeding point of that specialty when it comes to those particular conditions. But it can also be easy to kind of put your blinders on and not be as fully engrossed in other specialties, and so you might not necessarily misattribute what you're seeing, but hammers seeds nails. And so for me, whenever I see someone that's a little bit, let's say they're a little bit confused, I'm going to think, okay, what's going on with their brain, as opposed to thinking, okay, is it that they're in pain? Is there something else going on with their kidneys or something that might be resulting in kind of the overall similar like phenotype? It looks the same, but it's not. The underlying pathophysiology is different. And why I think it really matters moving further out into space is you're not going to have as readily available a specialist, right? You would want to have a generalist. That's why right now the space medicine community is largely populated by generalists. So family medicine practitioners, internal medicine doctors, emergency medicine, especially, particularly because if something were to go bad, you would want the people who are the specialists when things go bad, and it's the EM docs. But of course, I think it's going to be important to have a really robust system of support. So let's say you send an EM doc with the first group of people to a lunar colony, you're going to need to have rapid diffusion of information and knowledge so that they can rely on those subspecialists. And so that's why, remote medicine has kind of popped up, because remote medicine is a little bit more akin to what your experience is with how your family was with doctors, where it's like this one person that, yeah, they might have particular interests or particular strengths in other things, but they're the person. So you have to rely on their knowledge and what they've learned and kind of go from there.
That makes sense. And as you talk about remote medicine, I mean, it's one thing like being on the International Space Station and having like no delay communication and
Yep.
high throughput with people on the ground who could walk you through things. And it becomes still probably possible being on the moon with like a half-second delay and getting through. But I mean, if we take a trip to Mars, those people are going to be completely on their own.
Yeah, I mean that the 7-minute, 8-minute delay is could be potentially catastrophic. Yeah.
Well, and even more than that, I mean, there's going to be a point in the orbit where Earth and Mars are going to be opposite sides of the sun.
Yep.
And unless we have communication satellites appropriately positioned, you may have no communication.
Yeah, and that's kind of a big push that some of the folks over at Johnson have been working on. There's kind of, and there might be more, but simplistically, there's kind of two broad strokey approaches that the medical community is trying to do. One is kind of giving the astronauts the tools they need to be able to make their own medical decisions, and then the other tool is kind of how they can best facilitate that. So for example, what I mean by that is right now there is something called AMOS, which the acronym escapes me, but effectively what it is, it's a handbook, it's a digital handbook so that any person can use it on how to use an ultrasound machine to basically visualize from the kidneys to theoretically the gallbladder, and then it shows different pathologies so that, let's say you have an astronaut, they have the ultrasound machine, they can pop up the AMOS, which was developed by Exploration Medical Capabilities at Johnson, by the EXMC people. They boot this system up, and so they're able to complement what they learned with the ultrasound when they were, before they went up. They're able to complement what they've learned to try and visualize normal and abnormal disease processes. So that's one of the main ones. And then the other one is what everybody else is really trying to work on is artificial intelligence, and seeing if there's some kind of autonomous robotic system that could be potentially used. I think we're a little bit further away from that than we are with just trying to beef up the system that we have, which is humans doing human things. But that's something that is being very, very, very rapidly worked on.
Yeah, and it's not just medical knowledge, right? It's engineering, scientific, technical. I mean, like these people have no clue what they need to know because they don't know what situations are going to get them. So it almost becomes like even a meta problem. Like, how do you train people and organize information so that you quickly identify what you need to know and learn it like on the spot?
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really challenging point, because how do you train for the unknowable? I think that's and I think that's why the analog astronaut community has really taken off the past couple of years, is to try and strategize and to try and put people in circumstances that might be potentially unforeseeable so that they can learn from that. Of course, it's not exactly the same, right? You don't get the radiation component of things, and you obviously don't get the gravity component of things, but there's a growing number of analog astronaut scenarios which might hopefully provide a better clarification of what things will be on, like on the moon, and I think more importantly on Mars. But yeah, I mean, that's true. And that's why I think it's ultimately more prudent to beef up the human system of things than the artificial intelligence, because we have that heuristical sense. We can be creative and we can apply a little bit more analogical thinking to things. Because if you have an AI that's scripted for certain scenarios, what happens when there's a scenario that it's not scripted into its, into how it operates?
Yeah, definitely. And also, even worse case, when it starts kind of doing the zombie thing, where it's kind of stuck in its loop, and that may be not only unhelpful but destructive.
Right. Yeah. And that's, yeah, exactly. And that's why I think ultimately sending trained crew who are not just specialists, but have a wide general knowledge, so that, let's say the physician gets sick, who's going to take care of the physician? Or let's say the engineer, gets stuck with an engineering problem, who's going to help them get out of their situation? That's why I think it's important to have obviously the specialists, but you're going to have to train everybody with a basic knowledge of things.
I did want to ask you a few questions about the moon and that trip. Uh, when did you find out that NASA is planning to go to the moon?
Oh man. I want to say I'm a little bit later to the game. Like I grew up being obsessed with space, I think like a lot of us, but I did fall off the wagon, especially, in that 11-year lull. So I want to say I probably found out probably shortly after they announced the plans for Artemis. And the thing is, I was a lot more periphery at that time as far as my involvement with space people. So I didn't necessarily have a robust group of people that I could share my interest or kind of share my
Oh, this is
excitement
like,
with.
oh, I look like we lost your audio there just for a second, so I kind of.
Oh, so I was saying that I found out about it a little bit later than I think a lot of other people, but I didn't have a core group of space enthusiast friends that I could share that excitement with. So I probably want to say I found out a few months after they made the announcement for the Artemis missions.
And what do you think about us returning to the moon?
I think it's really important. I get asked that question as a doc who has interest in astronauts and aerospace. I get asked that, well, why invest more in going to the moon when we have problems on Earth? And from a purely objective scientific standpoint, it's critically important for a couple of reasons. One, last time we did this, the amount of scientific breakthroughs that had real world applications was huge. I think it was something like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ethan, but I think it's like for every dollar spent in the Apollo program, it got like $4 back in scientific innovation. Let that be through imaging data, let that be through development of Velcro, or a lot of other technical kind of breakthroughs. And they're projecting that Artemis might be even higher than that. So there is that, right? That it's basically a massive infusion of cash funds into science, which is always a good thing. And so that, that promotes that. But the other thing is that, it's really important to have us kind of unify under a common cause again, and let that be through scientific research and scientific pursuit and the pursuit of advancing humanity. I think there's nothing more noble than that. And the last time something like this happened, there was a lot of political discourse. There was a lot of unhappiness. And I think it was important to have a rallying cry for people to get behind something that is objectively good, which is, advancing humanity and advancing our scientific pursuits.
I've heard of the spinoff kind of argument in a lot of circles. But I kind of like to take a step back and ask you a fundamental question. Do we explore to innovate, or do we innovate to explore? Or is it something else?
Ooh, good question. I think exploration of the unknown is human nature. I think we're curious creatures by design. I think really life is curious. You know, if you think back to a single cellular organism, if you look at like the videos of when they put this little stimuli in front of like a little amoeba, it's actually the nature for the amoeba to explore. So it will actually go towards whatever stimuli this is, and this is unknowing if it's dangerous or not. So I think it's human nature to continue to be curious. Actually, the further we, and you see this, you know, with kids, right? Kids as they grow up, they are grabbing all these things. They want to taste them because they're curious. They're making their own little hypotheses and experimentations. It's kind of cool to see. And as we grow up, we have more inhibitions, and we have more blockades and kind of higher levels of cognitive processing that will create more of this. But I think fundamentally we still want to kind of population wise be the kid that sees something and wants to see what it tastes like. And that's why I think that's a big reason why we want to do this. It's hardwired into our DNA to be curious and to want to learn. And so I definitely think we innovate to explore.
Um, when you look at the future of humanity, like 200 years from now, what does it look like to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully things look great on Earth. I really do think, having a higher focus on science is a good thing. I mean, it promotes conversation. It promotes like academic scrutiny. It allows for people to critically assess situations and arguments presented in front of them. So you know, the kind of the discourse is good. But more importantly, you know, the more things we unlock, let that be microbiologic data, let that be more human systems data, then that will teach us more about how we could potentially improve, you know, that be from the health of an ecosystem to the health of an individual. And another thing is that, you know, 200 years in the future, theoretically, we've already colonized the moon. And if we've colonized the moon and we're able to have a thriving ecosystem there when it comes to, you know, botany and when it comes to animal life and all that, then we could take that technology and hopefully make the parts that are more arid or unhospitable on Earth, make that more amenable, so that, you know, hopefully starvation has dropped in places like sub-Saharan Africa because they've taken the technology that they've applied to space, to that area. Or, you know, maybe certain health conditions like we see, certain kind of radiation exposures, or certain kind of neurologic conditions that we see with microgravity, maybe those have been further unlocked. So, you know, overall 200 years in the future, I think things are going to look better as long as we continue to have that spirit of exploration and we continue to collaborate for that.
Um, I was looking at the moon one night and thinking along the lines of what you were talking about, having animal and plant life on the moon. I was trying to imagine how that might be possible. So I was like thinking, you know, maybe you have like this greenhouse that eventually just keeps getting built on, eventually extends around the whole moon, and the gray moon becomes green. And then I had like this weird thought about here on Earth, you know, as we kind of go into these natural environments, we have organizations like Greenpeace kind of opposing kind of this industrialization, exploitation, you know, however you want to frame it. I was wondering if we would have like a complementary organization, maybe called Greypeace, that would be opposing sort of this transformation of the moon, and kind of like what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's it. Not only that, but also like historic sites. You know, because you have all the Apollo folks that landed there. You know, their first steps and a lot. Like, do you build over it or not? I would think that tourism is obviously a massive aspect of what we're seeing, right? I mean, a lot of the Blue Origin folks and SpaceX. I mean, that's, or, you know, Axiom or even Hilton this past week saying that they're getting into the hotel game. Tourism is going to be a big part of it. So I think for the sake of needing to keep business being good, I think you're probably going to need a degree of conservation. Yeah, that's tough if there's going to be like lunar protectionists, you know, for the purpose of, I don't know, protecting more of the regular. I'm not sure. I think there's bigger things at play than protecting the lunar soil, outside of who's going to protect the lunar soil. You know, who does that responsibility fall upon? Which is obviously, oops, sorry, that's that screaming call page that I was telling you about. Who's responsible for protecting that lunar soil? That's really tough. I don't know if we're there yet. I know like the Artemis Accords, a whole bunch of country, I think like 20 something countries, if not more, have signed them, and it's basically trying to negotiate and strategize who's going to have the responsibility for what when theoretically all the countries are represented on the moon. But in order for that to happen, I think we do need to have more green. So I think something's got to give. And does that mean utilizing the regolith for that? Yeah, I guess so.
But it's kind of funny. A lot of it has to do with precedents. We think nothing about cutting down all the trees and displacing all the animals and plants whenever we go and build a neighborhood. And that's
Right.
because we've done it so many times that we've kind of become numb to it. These first excursions to the moon will be new. And I think there'll be a lot of sensitivities that will disappear once it becomes commonplace.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's why it's going to be one of the most important things is going to be cataloging and making sure that everything is well documented, so that before we just, like you said, just start going through and not wrecking ball stuff, but going through kind of more grossly, that we make sure that there's nothing that could be potentially missed. But I mean, I will say people are so cautious right now. They want to make sure that the system is being protected. They want to make sure the regolith is being protected, especially because regolith causes its own kinds of problems. I think people are being so cautious that hopefully we don't see that. But it's hard to say once everybody's kind of getting in the game and it's a race, because it is right now, right? It's a who's going to be the first country to get people to the moon again. But let that be the United States, let that be China. So hopefully in the spirit of competition, we don't act more rashly and cause more destruction than we'd like.
I hope so. If you could, would you take a trip to space?
I would. I don't know if I would. I've talked to my wife about this. I definitely would, because I think we all need to kind of get that fixed, and I think she would too. Going beyond that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm much more interested in kind of supporting the pursuit, from where I'm at here, and more as a preventative role than going to space. But I think probably I would for sure go to a low Earth orbit. I probably would go to the moon, but I think beyond that, to Mars and everything would be a little bit too much for me.
But let's say your descendants do decide to go to Mars, and it's 200 years in the future, and your great 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 great, I'm not sure how many greats it is, but she's really great granddaughter is in high school on Mars in history class doing a project on the 2020s, so it's 2220, and now she's doing a project on the 2020s. What do you hope is worth remembering from this decade 200 years from now?
So, particularly to science or everything?
Just anything. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not
Okay.
sure what I remember from the 1820s.
Yeah.
I really have no clue what was going on then. I guess steamships, maybe the telegraph. I don't know.
I think the big thing that this decade is going to be remembered for is the kind of the pursuit, or not the pursuit, but the engagement of commercial entities with governments to kind of satisfy common interests, for the sake of that kind of colonization. I think the thing is, like, when you think back to example like the Mayflower, right? People know the context for which the Mayflower started. They don't know necessarily a lot of the key players, and there wasn't really companies involved. But I think it will probably be something similar to that, where they'll know, well, why did these companies get involved? And I mean, the companies, they got involved because they wanted to see the same common goals. They wanted to see humanity in space, and they wanted to see industry in space, and they wanted to see humanity on other planets. And effectively, like Elon Musk said a couple of days ago in a tweet, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And I know he said that a couple of times before. And that's one of the big reasons why he does what he does. And I know he gets flack for a lot of kind of adjuvant and alternative thoughts that he has, but when it comes to this particular mission, I mean, that's what he's focused on. But I think more so broad strokes, it's that people will remember that this was when companies and space, governmental space entities really work together, which you don't see that a lot in other industries, where the governmental entities and commercial interests kind of align. So ideally, again, I say that ideally because, of course, not everything's perfect, and not everything's rosy. But I think when it comes to something like this, the ends do justify the means to achieve that.
Yeah, and I think it's like one of those things. It might be like a really complicated, difficult, painful medical procedure. It's like it's really too difficult to justify until you actually see the positive end result.
Yeah,
You got to
and
have
this
a
could
lot
be, I
of
mean, this
faith
could be,
to push
and this,
through.
yeah, this could be just like societal growing pains. I mean, it's just something that we just kind of have to work through and work the kinks out. It's definitely macrocosmic of a lot of the issues that we have.
Well, Mark, that's pretty much all the questions I had. Is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't cover?
I don't think so. No, I think it's important that, again, we have these kinds of conversations, especially across lots of different types of people, because we really wanted to document what's happening, not just what's being talked about in the media, or what's being talked about or reported on social media. I think it's, like you said, it's important to hear from the person who doesn't necessarily have a voice. I'm not saying that's me, but like when you interview people like on the street, I think it's important to hear what their thoughts are, because that's what really shows how much what we're doing is kind of percolating down to those people. It's kind of coming down to those people, because I think you and I have seen it. It's easy to kind of get wrapped up in our own little echo chambers and our corners of social media, where we obviously get really excited for certain kind of things that are happening, but most of the other people outside of that don't really know. But again, I think what you're doing is really cool, because you're making sure that those people are being heard, and you're making sure that their thoughts on where we're going to be in the future is important, so that we have a really diverse collection of thoughts. And to see, I think over time, with more stuff that's happening, for example, when Artist One finally goes up, see if those opinions change. And so I think it'll be cool to kind of have these different samples to see how public perception and public belief is changing. So yeah, keep on doing what you're doing, Nathan.
I really appreciate it, Mark. And if you know somebody else that'd be willing to participate, I have over 800
Sure.
more days to go. So
sure, yeah, sounds good.
well,
And I'm sure I do.
But you have a good rest of your day, and thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Of course, yeah. Like I said, I'll talk with some folks and see if anybody else is interested. But otherwise, yeah, just keep on doing it. It's awesome.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.